So today we're going to look at decimal place value. So in the last video we looked at whole number place value and we were looking at base 10 materials you maybe used in primary school. Okay, so we've got units, and if you stick 10 of them together you've got 10, stick 10 of them together you've got 100, and stick 10 of them together and you've got 1,000. These are all whole numbers, so like hundreds, tens, units, they're whole numbers. And each one, as you go this way, you're getting 10 times bigger. But you can also go the other way where you're getting 10 times smaller. So if you imagine taking one of these little units and splitting it into 10, then you'd have a tenth. And if you split that little teeny bit into 10, you'd have a hundredth. And you can keep splitting and splitting and splitting, and you're going to get tiny, tiny little pieces. Okay? And you can kind of imagine it. It's maybe easier to imagine it as like a great big wedding cake. So if you had a great big square to make it easier to draw a wedding cake, and that's 1 unit. Okay? And then imagine splitting that into 10. Let's split it into like 10 stripes. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Sorry, it's a bit messy. Is that right? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Yeah, that's not so bad. Okay. Each of these is 1/10. Okay. And then I can split it up again into hundreds. Okay. So if I split that into 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 little bits. That's probably about the amount of wedding cake you'd get a wedding. Okay, so that's 1/100th. Okay, and then you could split that up again into 10. I probably can't on this. Let's split it half and then into 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Each of these tiny little, like one mouthful of the wedding cake. And then you'd split it up into like, each one of them into 10 tiny little crumbs, okay? So you can see how we're splitting, making numbers smaller and smaller and smaller, okay? And how we write these, we'd write 1/10 as 0.1. 100th is 0.01. 1,000th is like 0.001. A 10,000th is like 0.0001, and each of these is just getting smaller and smaller and smaller, from being a big whole cake to being, you know, a good chunk of cake, to being a little slice, to being a mouthful, to being a little crumb, to being a little atom. Do you know? It's broken down into tiny, tiny bits. Now, a wee trick is if you write these, like if you ignore the dot and write it backwards. So that's 0.1, but if you look at it backwards, it looks like a 10. If you look at the 100th backwards, it looks like 100. If you read the 1,000th backwards, it looks like 1,000. Okay, just ignoring the dot. That's just a little trick to help you remember. Okay. Excuse me. So let's look at these questions now. What do the digits stand for in these numbers? So in this one, we've got 5 whole units, okay? And then that point splits up the whole numbers from the decimal part, okay? So that 0.9, that's 9/10. So that's like having, 9 of these big long slices of wedding cake, okay? In this one, we've got 3 tens and 8 units is 38. Okay, that's the whole number part. And then look, we've got 2 tenths. So that's like if we had 2 of these great big long slices. 7 hundredths. It's quite hard to say, so hundredths. Okay, so that's 7 of these little slices, and then we've got 6 thousandths. It'd be like having 6 extra little mouthfuls of cake at the end. Okay? So we would read that as 38.276. Okay? And now in this one we've got 9 units. We've got 0 tenths. I don't even really need to write that, but 0 tenths. Okay. 3 hundredths. Missing a T in there. 7 thousandths. 1 10,000ths. Sorry, just one of them. 1 10,000th. And then 800 thousandths. Okay, and when you read it out, so you're reading it out as 9.03718. And one place people kind of get confused is when you're saying these just as digits, it kind of seems like they're all the same kind of size, like 0, 3, 7, 1, 8, they're all numbers between 1 and 10. And it kind of ignores the fact that these are getting so much smaller. So we've got 3 hundredths is so much bigger than 7 thousandths. And that's just hugely bigger than 1 10,000th. And these 800 thousandths, they're like little tiny specks here, do you know? So don't think about these decimal places as being all the same size. They're getting much smaller as you move to the right. Okay, now we've kind of pictured this one way in terms of having a big wedding cake. Okay, but let's think as well about where some of these lie on the number line. Okay, so if I've got the number line from 0 to 1, that's kind of, instead of writing this as a square, like 1 unit square, I'm writing it as a scale. Okay, and you can see this is split up into 10. So each of these kind of longer ones, that breaks up my 1 unit into 10. So each of these is a tenth. 0.1, 0.2, 0.3, 0.4, 0.5, 0.6, 0.7, 0.8, 0.9, and then 1 whole unit. One thing that people tend to think about is that this is then 0.10. Now that is not true at all, okay? It doesn't go 8, 9, 10 like that. That is actually, if we look at the place value of it, that is 1 tenth and no hundredths. Okay, and 1 tenth and no hundredths, we've already got it right there, 1 tenth and no hundredths. So I'm going to rub that out so we don't remember that, okay? So, and then if we look again from 0 to 0.1, that's split again into 10 tiny bits. So it's like we've got, I don't think this is even going to be big enough for me to write it out, but we've got 0.01, 0.02, 0.03, and you're going to have to use your imagination for the rest of them, going 0.04, 0.05, all the way up to 0.09 is there, and then 0.1 is next. And we could take a different one as well. So this is like, there's 0.4, and then we're going to have 0.41, 0.42, 0.43. And you can think of this scale as being kind of like 0 up to £1. Okay, so this would be like 10p, 20p, 30p, 40p. And then here you'd have 41p in there, 42p. So breaking it up like a pound will help you up to 2 decimal places. Okay, then if you wanted 3 decimal places, like 0.974, it's like you'd need to zoom in even further. So you could zoom in. So we've got 0.9s there, and 0.97 is 7 little notches along there. And then if you took that little tiny gap, okay, and you zoomed in even further and you split that into 10, somewhere there, somewhere about the middle would be 0.974. Okay, so let's try putting some numbers on the number line now. Where would these numbers go? So 0.4, that's 4 tenths. So we're just splitting that into 4. So I'm counting along. 1, 2, 3, 4. There it is, that's for A, 0.4. Okay, 0.96, I can jump straight to 0.9 because I know it's just near 1. And then 0.96 would then be 6 of these smaller notches along. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. There I am there, that's part B, 0.96. Okay, and for this last one, I don't actually have like the notches for this, but let's have a look. So 0.621, well there's 0.4, 0.5, 0.6 is there. And then I'm counting along 2 different little notches. I shouldn't have scribbled that so much. You can just see it there, 1, 2, and 0.62. Let's rub out my scribblings. Oops, I put it at 6. So 0.62 is just there. Oh, already. And then it's going to be just a teeny tiny bit further along from that, okay? So imagine splitting that bit from 0.62 to 0.63, splitting that into 10 little bits, okay? And then you're just going to be one of those bits along. Okay, so that's kind of how we place them on a number line. Then let's do this last question, writing these numbers in digits. So 5/10, that's 0.5, okay? I've got no units, and I've got 5 these tenths. 300ths, well, I've got no tenths, and then I've got 300ths. 8,000ths, I've got no units, no tenths, no hundredths, and then I'm going to have 8,000ths. So that's kind of an introduction to decimal place value.